Just to confirm, even though we're live, my mic is not live yet, right? Until you send me live.
You are live. So regardless of whether or not you are live, the audience can still hear you.
Excellent, good news. Well, welcome everybody who's joining us. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. And that is I'm Bryan Pilkington, who folks who tune in usually know. And that helpful advice was from one of our rock star shoe folks, Emma. So thanks, Emma. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We're going to get going in just a couple seconds. We're just waiting for everybody to have a chance to hop on the line. All right. I think we've got enough folks on now. So here we go. All right. Welcome, everyone, to Community Ethics During COVID, Student Voices, and Interprofessional Discussion. If you're joining our COVID Ethics series for the first time, welcome. If you're a regular participant in these discussions, thanks so much. We're on the second episode of our second season, and I'm glad that everyone's here. These events are, of course, sponsored by IHS Bioethics, IHS Student Life, and the IHS Library. As COVID-19 continues to affect communities across the globe, plans and precautions for returning to semblances of normalcy vary. In today's session, I'm going to talk with a multidisciplinary panel of experts about what we owe others within our communities during this time. Our focus is going to be on the Seton Hall community, the sort of greater Seton Hall communities. But we hope, because we know that there are folks calling in from all over, we hope that this kind of conversation can serve as a model of interdisciplinary ethics conversations. Those of you who call in often know that we believe that interdisciplinary ethics conversations are the best ways to solve large ethics problems. You bring in a bunch of folks from diverse backgrounds with different approaches to the world, and we sort of practically reason through these challenges together. So with that bit of an intro, I'm going to turn to our panelists. And the first panelist we have today is Professor Judith Lothian. Judith Lothian is a professor in the College of Nursing, where she is the graduate chair at Seton Hall University, of course. And Judy is one of the few wonderful experts that we've actually had on before. So folks who call in regularly know that she was in our maternal fetal session. So Judy, thanks so much. Do I have you on the line?
I'm here.
Wonderful. Well, Judy, as we're thinking about what is owed to other folks within our communities, especially Seton Hall, Hackensack Meridian, the IHS campus, our law school, help us think through some of the challenges from your perspective, both as a member of this community and as a nurse.
Okay, I'm hoping I don't sound too nursey. I'm delighted to be here again, and I actually have spent a bit of time thinking about what I could possibly want to say, and sort of thinking about what we owe each other. I really think it can't be separated from what we owe ourselves. I see that as completely inseparable. And part of me wants to say, at the end of the day, what we should be really thinking about is being good to ourselves. And doing that, we're good to the people who we are in contact with. But anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit about masks and the whole idea of wearing a mask to protect others as opposed to protecting ourselves. Although there is some level of immediate protection to me when I wear a mask. But the research suggests, as we know, that wearing a mask is most effective I keep looking at my notes, so I'm not wandering. But when I wear a mask, I'm protecting you and everyone else I meet, so that ultimately, if everyone masks up, we're all protected. A very, very powerful way of being safe. You can make an analogy of sorts with vaccinations. If I'm vaccinated for measles, I'm protected, and hopefully I don't get measles. But just as importantly, if I don't get measles, I don't expose you or the wider community to measles. And of course, this is a big controversial issue, vaccinations in general, and the fact that by not being vaccinated, you're putting other people at risk, not just yourself. So immunizations protect not just the receiver, but all those with whom he or she has contact in much the same way, little different, but much the same as with masks. The other thing I wanted to talk about was hand washing, and this is, I suppose, where I get really nursey. But we now have a renewed appreciation for the importance of hand washing. My mother, who was a nurse, always claimed that, and it was one of the things she would get really angry about, that fastidious hand washing disappeared once antibiotics came on the scene. Before we had medication to fight disease, we relied almost exclusively on hygiene, including hand washing, and then again, clean air and good food, and a variety of other simple everyday ways that people stayed healthy before medicine came on the scene. And last week, Professor Kavanaugh did a great job describing Florence Nightingale's major contribution to health and safety. Of course, during the Crimean War, she nursed soldiers in field hospitals and identified that most of the soldiers who died did not die of battle wounds, but died of infection in field hospitals. And Professor Kavanaugh actually said these soldiers were safer not being taken to the hospital, staying out in the field. And actually, only 100 years ago, in the 1920s in New York City, the maternal mortality rate rose dramatically for women who went to hospitals. And you may or may not know that before the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, birth almost exclusively took place at home with midwives. And when it moved to hospitals with physicians, their dramatically huge increase in maternal mortality. Women who gave birth at home were safer. They were much less at risk of dying during childbirth. And the answer, it took actually almost a decade to figure it out, was hand washing. The docs were going from going from one woman to the next, doing autopsies, never washing their hands, not wearing gloves. It's pre-glove days. So hand washing literally saves lives. And one of the nice things, there are some really good things that are coming out of the challenges that we face with being safe with COVID, has been the great reminder of the importance and really the power of hand washing. I certainly thought I was pretty good with hand washing, but I'm much better now, that's for sure. So it's essential for staying healthy and stopping the spread of disease. But what isn't talked about, and I just thought, why not? I've got 5 minutes. What isn't talked about during this pandemic is being good to yourself. And one of the things that happens with being good to yourself is it's all part of building a very strong immune system. And that is foundational, I think, to everything. I mean, beyond hand washing, beyond masks, let's build our immune system. So it's kind of back to basics, eating well, sleeping enough, staying active, trying to avoid, or if we can't avoid stress, trying to manage it. We could get into the drink green tea and take magnesium, but I think it's simpler things. It can be yoga, it can be prayer, it can be whatever it is that helps us as individuals relax. And we're all very different with that. But I think that being able to, and this is a challenge in a time of that's overwrought with fear, or can be overwrought with fear, is to be able to be calm, relax, and figure out ways that you can do it in your everyday life. And I will share that mine is reading British murder mysteries, preferably those that take place in great manor houses out in the country. And I wouldn't want to tell you how many I have read since the end of February. It's almost getting embarrassing, but it's kept me sane. So I think being good to yourself in the midst of this new normal world that we're living in is extraordinarily important, and probably just as important as those masks and hand washing. Anyway, that's it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Judy. A number of really helpful reflections. We're going to move in a second to our next panelist, but first, I just want to highlight the really interesting and important ethical issue that you raised about masks, right? So there is some benefit to you, the wearer, but it's really a benefit to others. So, and we can pick this up in the Q&A, but there's a sort of some questions about so the ethics of free riding, and you sort of nicely connected this to a parallel situation, at least parallel in terms of the ethical considerations, which is vaccines and folks who don't go in for vaccines. So a number of helpful things to point to in the Q&A. And I don't know, I don't think I would have gone with British murder mysteries. I'm more of a Russian literature guy, but I like this. This is good. This gives me the next thing to turn to. So thank you. We're going to move now to our next panelist. Our next panelist is Jenny Orth. Jenny is an undergraduate student at Seton Hall. She's currently the president of the Biomedical Humanities Club. She's a biochemistry and a philosophy major, and she suffered through my bioethics class last year. So she has a good amount of resilience. So Jenny, thanks so much. I know you're calling in and joining us from Texas. We appreciate that. And we're just really looking for your perspective, what you think about the situation going on. You're sort of our local undergraduate bioethics expert. How are you thinking through these issues in COVID, especially what might be owed in light of communities?
Hi, so thank you for having me first off. So I think that locally, in terms of like Seton Hall, things that I've seen or I guess experienced, like just last week, there was a particular student in one of my classes who truly believes that if you don't wear a mask, CO2 will accumulate, and that's very bad for your health. And I think number one on the topic is just to be educated, right? I think we all value that as, well, attending at a higher institution, but also, you know, teaching at one for y'all. And I think that is number one. The second fold of education, since I am a East Asian American, during the COVID times, for me personally, identity has always come first. So I definitely do view this issue from an identity perspective. So prior to COVID-19, the discrimination towards Asian Americans was mostly centered around the model minority myth. And for those who don't know what the model minority myth is, it's basically pinpointing like Asian Americans at a higher socioeconomic status. And this obviously just, I guess, targets people of color against each other. And it's just not a healthy way of thinking. Now the shift has become a problem where Asians are considered to be the virus itself. And this association is obviously toxic because we all know that viruses are not associated with a particular race or people. So for an example, like last month in New York City, there was an 89-year-old Chinese American woman who was set on fire. Or how literally in my neighboring city in Dallas, Asian Americans are receiving hate letters that are telling us to return back to our countries. And how if I were to walk outside without a mask, or specifically like if I were to go on a walk in my neighborhood and I wasn't wearing a mask, this becomes an issue of race and like those kinds of looks where it's like, you know, questioning what kind of, I guess, I don't know, it just becomes like a targeted area of identity first, opposed to, I guess, the public safety hazard that most other people are concerned about first. So I guess that's my perspective on that. Just being educated on the topic specifically for the sake of one, the public safety health hazard, but also two, how other people who are being targeted purely because of race-based hate is existent, and that would be very beneficial to them to like steer away from that.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jenny. I mean, the education is always a good answer, so I'm very glad that you framed your response in that way. And secondly, the points that you raise about identity are excellent. And I know we've had, just for folks who call in regularly, we've had Professor Casey Choi on a few sessions ago in our first season when we discussed discrimination. And Professor Choi has a new book out, I guess new last year, engaging a number of these issues specifically associated in theology with Asian Americans. So appreciate that perspective, and also raising some of those identity focused and in some ways existential questions, which I think are rooted in fear, but it's very, very helpful. Thank you. We're going to now turn, and we'll pick up on identity and a number of other issues in our Q&A. We're now turning to another one of our excellent students. Erica Braun is a second-year medical student at the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine. She, like Jenny, has suffered through some of my ethics lectures. She is a representative of the IHS Student Council, and as I said, she's a second-year medical student at the HMH School of Medicine. So, Erica, thanks so much for joining us. As a medical student in the second year of your education, really just as with the other panelists, looking for your perspective and how, given what you're studying and what you've seen and where you're going in your career, how are you thinking about what we might owe each other as part of our community, as a future member or sort of a beginning member of the medical community? Help just share some of your thoughts with us so we can think through these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. I never would have thought that my first year as a medical student or just studying medicine in general would have been framed by a global pandemic, and it definitely has been framed by that. A lot of what my professors have taught me and their experiences they've shared have been based on what they're seeing in the emergency department. And I think a good thing, I guess I could say, that is coming from this pandemic is I definitely feel inspired and more motivated, to study immunology and to study harder, because it's so much more than just me and the books and my test scores. It's beyond that. It's about helping our community stay safe and educating people. I think what Jenny said about education is something that has really resonated with me, even though, I've only been in school for a year or so. My family and my friends, they come to me asking for advice on different topics. What kind of mask should we wear? Should we be wearing masks? Like, should we go out to restaurants? What is COVID-19? What does this all mean? So it's inspired me, and it's also motivated me, and also has kind of showed me that I have a responsibility as a future physician to really educate myself and to be an advocate. So I think that's something that I owe the community, to share what I'm learning from my professors who have firsthand experience in the emergency department, and to share that with, my circle. And yeah, I think it's definitely a big role, being a future physician and a medical student, because people look to you when you wear that white coat. What you do and what you say matters. And I'll be out in a park and I could probably take my mask off because there aren't people, for 20 feet or so. But I keep it on more out of principle, I think, and more like as a metaphor to show that, I'm doing this, we all should do this. And I trust science. I trust, the physicians that I'm learning from and the clinicians that teach me every day. So I think it's, holding myself to a high standard so people can kind of look to me. And that responsibility I never really thought of. I know a lot of my professors say that physicians have to be advocates, for all different health, issues and inequalities. So it's not just helping that one patient in front of you, it's helping the community at large. And I think another aspect, just in my reflection, is there's not tons of, diseases or infections that we counsel patients on that really affect other people. And what I mean by that is when you tell someone, who, let's say, has celiac disease, don't eat gluten. You're telling them that because you are trying to help them and their health, and ultimately it's their decision. And it makes me think about patient autonomy, right? So ultimately they're the ones who get to decide if they're going to follow that that diet or that lifestyle or take that drug. It's ultimately the patient's decision. But here with COVID-19, it's kind of different, right? There's a different dynamic. Your decisions are not only affecting your health, but they're affecting my health. And my health affects, you know, the people that I come into contact with. So I think it's just an interesting dynamic of, now that we all are affected by everyone's actions, how do we, you know, counsel each other? How do we hold each other accountable? And how do we do this in a way that's not paternalistic, but rather educational? So these are all different ideas and thoughts that have been going kind of through my head, that I have a responsibility to, you know, teach my family and my friends, and to wear the mask, because the alternative to me is much worse than just feeling a little sweaty on a hot summer day.
Excellent. Erica, thanks so much. You raised so many important and interesting ethical issues, and you framed it so nicely. I mean, the notion of a moral exemplar, right? And feeling the responsibility of your profession in particular, and as a member of the health professions, to lead by example. So the case you offered, or the example you offered of still wearing a mask, even if you're in the park where people are very, very far away. This has been raised in other contexts with folks who it is believed that, and there's some epistemological questions in the background, but who are believed to no longer be contagious. They have sufficient antibodies or something like that, but still wearing the mask as a symbol. And I think that's a really nice image for, you know, all of us to reflect on, and raises helpfully, which you also framed excellently, the difference between some considerations associated with autonomy that we talk about in medical ethics, maybe a little bit too much, but the sort of more important, in light of COVID, public health and sort of outward looking considerations, right? So what we do deeply affects others. And you've actually highlighted in a really nice way, again, for folks who call in regularly. In one of our earlier sessions, we had philosopher Richard Kim from Loyola Chicago, who talked to us about how existentially or sort of reflectively, COVID-19 is such a challenging issue for human beings because we're so closely tied together, but in some ways this has pushed us apart. So I think you've sort of added a positive opportunity to that kind of gloss. So thank you. This was excellent. We're going to turn to our next panelist, but we'll return to you in the Q&A. And as we move to our next panelist, a reminder for everyone, please do send any questions in to us. You can tweet them at us. At SHU Bioethics is our Twitter handle. You can also just send them in live through the question and answer feature we have here. There's one question already in. Send them in as you wish. We'll get to them at the end in our Q&A. So now I'm going to turn to our final panelist, Shauna Cooper Gibson. Dr. Cooper Gibson is the Vice President of Student Services at Seton Hall. So Shauna, thanks so much for joining us. We've got a great group of students and faculty already. So it's really great to have an administrative and sort of broader community perspective. What I'd like to ask you to talk about, and jump into any of the ethics framing that you like, but to share a bit with our audience about the Seton Hall Pledge, because that is I think exemplifies in a number of ways the ethical concerns and how students and other members of our community are responding to COVID in light of a pledge.
All right. Thank you so much for having me again, Dr. Pilkington. It's really quite honestly a privilege to be part of this panel. So Jenny, Erica, Judith, it's really great to hear your thoughts, because I think it helps frame my response. Judith, we'll have to talk offline later because I'm also a fan of the British mystery genre. But Jenny, you brought up a really important thing that I want to make clear very first of all. We're facing two pandemics right now. It's not just of COVID-19, but systemic racism. And so we've got these two things going on at the same time. So I just want to note that, and I know we'll talk about pieces of identity, but I just want to note that our community, our global community, is facing two pandemics, and that's really important to acknowledge. So I appreciate your words talking about your experience and what you're hearing locally in Texas. So thank you for sharing that. And Erica, you talked about it being bigger than you. bigger than your friends, bigger than all of us, and the metaphor of wearing the mask, even when you are socially or physically distant, and the autonomy and the decision that you're making. So I think that leads nicely into our thoughts on the pledge. So if I go back a little bit in our history, at Seton Hall really was addressing the pandemic of COVID early on, back in the spring, and I was lucky enough to be able to partner with Dr. Lothian as part of the health intervention and communication team. And our initial charge was really to respond to the pandemic and the virus on campus, and that included, we had to go to online learning. We had to move our students off campus pretty quickly and follow the ever-changing guidance that we were giving. So if you all remember, it was, okay, now we're stopping this particular service, and then we're stopping this, and really having to respond to that from a larger scale across the university. And I couldn't think of a better partner than one of our faculty in nursing and several others in facilities and the priest community and so forth. So it was really a larger effort. I just had the privilege of being able to guide and lead that. And we continue doing that work today with our reopening plans. And so the work did shift this summer, in which we had to really think about our restart plans and what that looked like and how we can engage everyone on campus in what is going to be a huge cultural shift. I think many of you know I'm from the Midwest. We smile all the time. We smile at people when we walk by. In a mask wearing culture, you don't recognize that. But it was also important that the health and safety of all of our campus is paramount. And so then how do we shift that culture that is not used to wearing masks all the time, at all times, in public places, outside, inside, in classrooms? How do we do that and abide by our shared responsibility? So again, going back to some of Erica's comments about it not just being you, not just being me, but being us, for not just our community at Seton Hall, but our global community. And so part of that culture shift, we thought it'd be good to name an idea of a pledge. And in that pledge, which hopefully many of you have seen, and we're happy to send some information out. We have a whole website dedicated to it, but it really speaks to what Dr. Lothian has mentioned, what Jenny has mentioned, what Erica has mentioned about a commitment to the health and safety of all of us. It includes a daily check-in, really taking a check-in of all of your symptoms. We want to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. If you have any symptoms, stay home. We want you to stay safe. We want you to get better. But it's for that, not just your own safety, but it's for the safety of others. We include language on washing hands. So as Judith was talking about washing hands, hopefully that's becoming more and coming back to the forefront. With soap and water, using the hand sanitizer that we have in abundance around campus. We talked about physical distancing, and I want to name that specifically. So I know a lot of the language, particularly coming out of different entities, it talks about social distancing. I think we need to differentiate that from physical distancing. We need to stay apart physically. We still want you to remain socially connected. We are socially connected right now. And I know that there have been some questions about what that means, is that we continue to engage in seminars like this and series like this, that we continue to engage each other online and virtually. So we don't want you to be socially disconnected, but physically we do, again, for the health and safety of everyone, including the wearing of masks. We want you all to clean and disinfect high touch areas, and we want you to protect yourself and others, because this then protects everyone else. One of the things that we paid attention to is how we've seen the spread of the virus in other states. If you notice, the Northeastern Corridor in particular has seen really good response to this culture shift. We are trying to do with the pledge that names those different pieces, really goes into the idea that this is our shared responsibility. And I think we see that not only in our university, but in our state, in our upper corridor of the Northeast, and why we're seeing a lessening of the spread. One of the things that I think is really important to think about is that everyone is committed to this, so that we as a community saying these are the standards by which our Seton Hall community is going to be abiding by our health and safety protocol. So we take these very, very seriously. I know initially, it was something new and different, but one of the things I can say is walking on campus in South Orange, I see everyone wearing their masks like they're supposed to. I see everyone washing their hands, using the sanitizer, and hopefully some of our other panelists have seen that too. But again, it's really about how we ingrain our culture. I know she couldn't be on the call with us today, but Student Government Association just about a week and a half ago hosted a panel for students on the Seton Hall Pledge. We had 733 students attend that session. So it seems like there are a number of people who are interested in learning more and why this is important. And really, again, it's protecting our community and it's protecting Seton Hall. I think we, as we say in our hashtag Seton Hall Strong, this can't be done without all of us having this cultural shift to really making our health and safety protocols paramount.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sean. I really appreciate it. And that's sort of a tour de force of all the sort of both the important aspects of the pledge that sort of bind us together in many ways as a community, but also highlighting, just the breadth of important. I mean, we could just have chopped you up into a bunch of sound bites, and these are things that everyone can remember, right? So we've got, and just as key points as folks start writing in the questions, because we'll turn to our Q&A in 1 second, but we've got the dual pandemic threat. Again, for folks who call in regularly, I'd recommend, again, Kirk Johnson's book, who's a professor at Seton Hall, in addition to Casey Choi's book. Kirk's book is on race-based medicine and engages some of these themes and is a really nice reading for a background to this. So we've got the dual pandemic issue. We've got large concerns about what are owed to other people during this time, the helpful highlights of the importance of just basic hygiene of washing your hands. There's a great deal we can talk about. So Shauna, since you were the last panelist that we had, I'm going to direct our first question to you and then let especially the students, but also Professor Lothian jump in. So someone had asked, and you touched on it a bit, sort of about the importance of sociality in college. So the questioner asks, while masks protect others and ourselves from the physical threat of infection, new students in particular report that masks interfere with making new friends. Any suggestions? Because too much social isolation will aggravate mental health needs. So I think you've touched on this sort of well in your comments. Any sort of helpful suggestions from your perspective?
Absolutely. So we shifted in student services in particular to try to alleviate any type of social limitations for our students. So we have a number of engagement opportunities that are either physically distant or virtually socially engaging. And so one of the things that I would suggest to anyone who is interested is to really look at we have weeks of WOW, and I have to do the WOW hands, jazz hands. Colleen Dalaval will get mad at me if I don't. But one of the things that we've done is we've made a number of different opportunities for our students to engage socially. And a lot of that will be virtual, but some of it will be in person that allow for the physical distancing. If you go onto our Weeks of WOW website, we have a number of different activities, including the first 56 days, which include a number of different activities that our students can do either virtually or in person. And the reason that we did that is because we have students who are not only on our campus and maybe feeling a little isolated, but we also have a number of our students who are learning remotely right now. And so we still want them to still be engaged with the university in some way, shape, or form. Several examples of that include our virtual panels that we have, or ones like these. But additionally, we had a drive-in movie last Friday. We had a Ferris Bueller's Day Off for us old school folks. We showed that movie, and we'll have continued opportunities going on. And if you check out our website, there's a way to review the number of different opportunities that we're having at our various campuses as well as remotely. And so again, physical distancing does not mean socially isolating. There are a number of different opportunities. I also want to share that all of our services remain available to all of our students. So those students who are feeling socially isolated, I encourage you all to reach out to our counseling and psychological services. We have adjusted hours and availability based on what our student needs are, and we know that this can be a particularly difficult time as new students in particular are acclimating to campus, and our returning students are coming back to a different type of campus.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rona. That's very, very helpful. What I want to do, since you mentioned student remote learning, is turn our questions to I want to turn our questions to our student, Jenny Orth, since she's currently calling in from Texas. Jenny, any suggestions?
Sorry, it kind of went out for a second. Could you repeat your question, please?
I think he might be frozen, but I think he was
Jenny,
asking about remote learning.
Okay, yeah. So from my perspective, how I've been making friends since freshman year, I didn't really have too many. I I don't know if this is strange or not, but I see a lot of people in my classes, and I'm like, oh, they're really active. They really care about this class. I'm going to reach out to them via Teams, and so I directly DM them, I guess, and I'm like, hey, want to be my friend? Want to be my study buddy? And they're usually really down. Like I haven't met a single person who isn't willing to engage with me in that front. Maybe it's because I'm a little more extroverted and I really do like talking to people, but that's how I've been able to make new friends at Seton Hall. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate that. And Shauna, thanks for, yeah, my video froze. So the fun aspects of remote engagement, but as long as we have enough people in a community, we can pivot over. So thanks, Jenny. Erica, as a medical student, any thoughts on this for fellow medical students, other health sciences students, undergrads, especially folks who are newer to the community? Everybody's masked up. How might folks make friends?
Yeah, I think, can you hear me?
Yep, all good.
I think it's a mindset shift, right? You have to be creative in how you now hang out. And it's getting better as our cases go down and there's more opportunities open. You know, parks are now open, their outdoor dining is happening. So we have more opportunities, but it's just thinking about things differently. Like going on walks with your friends is maybe how you socialize now instead of going to someone's dorm or stuff like that. So I think it's just being flexible. And on the side of academics, how to kind of fit academics into this world, it's not easy. First of all, be patient with yourself. Every day is probably going to be slightly different. Some days you'll feel really productive, and some days you might not, and that's okay too. I think in the beginning of the pandemic, you know, I was doing everything from my bedroom, and I was like, I'm not getting anything done that I'm supposed to, but I've never been a medical student in a pandemic before, so I'm not going to study the normal way I would. So I think it's just being flexible and being patient with yourself and getting creative on how you can study, you know, FaceTime calls. And I think we're all doing a good job with it. It's just being patient.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Erica. I really appreciate it. That's a very nice, helpful framing. I'm going to move to the next question, and folks, please feel free to send questions in as we go. So the next question sort of engages health literacy and asks about education. The questioner says, health literacy involves education, a cognitive construct that resides in executive functions of the brain. How do we address those with dogmatic beliefs, refusing to listen to science, ignoring best public health practices, and ethically putting others at risk? So I'll take the moderator's prerogative and say, only a bit of a smile, right? For all those at the Seton Hall community, anyone involved in education, which our students and faculty have highlighted, take philosophy courses, right? The arguments do the work, they support the claims. That's one really nice way to interrogate our own beliefs. So now I'll hop off my philosophy soapbox, and I want to turn first to Professor Lothian, and then we'll engage our other panelists here. Judy, any idea? You teach students, you're engaged in the community, you're a nurse. How do we deal with dogmatic beliefs against science, which is exacerbated by the current socio-political conversation?
Yeah. And you know, a lot of my work is related to birth issues, and birth is one of those things where there are very dogmatic positions that people take related to safety and how we do things and what's important and whatever. So what I found in these situations, when someone comes to me with no background in science and no background in knowing anything about pregnancy and childbirth, and I start talking about, this is what we know, this is what we don't know, this is what helps, this is what doesn't. You know, in a childbirth education class, for instance, I think what I've learned over a lot of years is to find people where they are and then to gently walk them down a path, respecting what they're thinking, but coming up with innovative ways to persuade to think differently. And sometimes that's storytelling. It's not jamming people's heads with facts. It's allowing time for discourse, for discussion, and really, really listening, as opposed to, we think differently and there's something wrong with you for thinking the way you're thinking. I'm going to share, Bryan knows that I spend a lot of time in Ireland, and happily I actually got to go this summer for 6 weeks. And for some reason, the Irish really, they locked down right away. They went for months without going more than a half a kilometer from their homes. They did everything right, but all of a sudden, when the Taoiseach says we're going to go to masks, they this summer were crazed over it. Don't you tell me I have to wear a mask. And interestingly, I did a little research of my own with how to best persuade, and actually did the same stuff that I do with persuading women to think differently about childbirth. Listened carefully, came up with gentle, persuasive arguments, framed it in, you're not doing this for other people, you're doing it for yourself too. And it kind of worked for some people, but it's a long slog, I think, to get people who hold rigid beliefs to give them up. And it really is persuasion, not just information dumping, I think.
Excellent. Yeah, go for it, Shawna. Thank you.
So, one of the things that we are very mindful of, particularly as it relates to students, is, developmentally, the brain continues to develop through 25, 26. So our students are actually a great population as we start to educate. And so we do have a strong education campaign around our health and safety protocols. And then we also have some practical application. All of our employees have had orientation on our health and safety protocols. So even if the beliefs are personal, in order to be on Seton Hall's campus, you are going to wear a mask. And I think those are the types of practices that I think, regardless of someone's beliefs or refusing to listen to science, I'm looking at the question directly, Seton Hall has made a strong statement with the pledge. So if I go back to the pledge language, we have said this is what is going to be required of our community. And it's not just of our community, any visitor to our community. So for those of you who have been, particularly to the South Orange campus, our visitors are given a copy of that same pledge saying you have checked your symptoms, you are going to abide by these particular rules. And so what I appreciate about that is Seton Hall has made a strong stance on, you can believe what you want to believe, but we as a community are committing to this. And I think that's a very important piece, in particular for our students, because I still think even if they are differing in belief system, they're going to abide by our health and safety protocols. And so I agree with Judith wholeheartedly, who was, again, also part of the authorship of the pledge, which is why we included her, is that it's an educational opportunity and developmentally really having these conversations with our students in particular about why this is important. And again, our partnership with the Student Government Association has also been really helpful. So we talked to them briefly, and next thing we know, on their Instagram page on SGA, they said real pirates wear masks. And we were like, we wholeheartedly agree. So it was just a beautiful relationship in which we talk and engage and educate each other. And as Judith's saying, we're making a cultural shift, not just for our students, but I think everyone on our campus.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean. And that's sort of the perfect slam dunk combination, right? So we have both in personal interactions and broader conversations, the importance of narrative in human lives and how we think about stories. So many folks will be familiar with the great philosopher Alistair McIntyre, who describes and sort of applies, maybe not as well as Judith said it. I mean, the way she put it out is accessible to everyone. But McIntyre talks about the narrative structure and the narrative unity of our lives. And sort of understanding how important stories are, I think is super helpful in terms of a certain kind of persuasion. Similarly, that doesn't discount the importance of having a community and communities of practice where there are standards that guide or sort of put our beliefs into practice, right? They guide where we're going. So to have a community that sort of has this kind of a pledge, and to think about the community as a moral exemplar, right? Sean, as you were saying, when other folks come to our campus, come to our campuses, excuse me. They know what we stand for, they know what our aims are, and it's helpfully integrated, right? Because we have great science faculty, we have great humanities faculty, we have great law faculty, and sort of coming together and respecting scientific evidence as our colleagues have best put it out is so important. So I want to shift to the students here because we have a question that just came in via Twitter. So the question is, are students policing their friends' social media shares and making sure that sources are accurate and verified? So an excellent informational science question from one of our library folks. So for the students, so Jenny and Erica, any interactions on social media are, I mean, you don't have to sort of out any of your friends, but are you running into folks, do you have colleagues, friends, fellow students who maybe are less inclined to wear masks in other contexts or less inclined to sort of believe scientific facts? And if so, do you engage on social media, like help some of the older folks like me sort of work through some of these things?
I could answer.
Thanks, Erica.
Yeah, no problem. I think by, virtue of surrounding myself with probably like-minded individuals in, a medical school, a lot of us do take it very seriously. But I also have family and friends that they say, quote, I'm over it, I'm just over this. Like, we can't live like this forever. We have to go back to our jobs and, we have to do things that make us happy. And I agree with all of those things. But what I would say to those people is, how can we do both? How can we continue to socialize and go back to what normalcy we enjoyed, but also do it in a safe way? So I don't engage too much on social media. I think I'm more of a, dinner table conversation, bringing up some of those hard conversations at the table, because I think that's where people listen. It's in your circle, right? Like if you have a close family member or a friend or a colleague that you see doing something that you might not agree with, like that's the time to have those kind of uncomfortable conversations and kind of say like, well, why don't you want to wear a mask, and try to understand where they're coming from, because that's the only way they're going to make change, is if they feel heard and you kind of grab onto something they care about and follow through with that.
Excellent, and an excellent model in general for any kind of bioethics or ethics conversation or any conversation about challenging subjects. So excellent, thank you. Jenny, anything to add to Erica, or any sort of experiences in trying to fact check others, or any sort of social media considerations, policing others, anything like that you could offer?
Yeah, sure. I was actually going to make a comment on, or just comment on something that I've noticed in observation. So in a lot of East Asian cultures, it's like common practice to wear a mask to protect yourselves from, protect others from yourself, right? It's more community based. They buy into the social contract, right? So what I've noticed, at least in my community, since I do live in Texas, it's very divided. We didn't really go through the phases or anything. A lot of my friends and family do not believe in this, in like the mask wearing mentality. But I have noticed that my Asian counterparts, their families are very strict on it, because they understand that it's not just the protection of like the minimal protection the mask gives yourself. It's for the other people, like Shauna and Erica have already explained. So it was more just an observation on that front.
Excellent, thank you. That's very helpful, and I appreciate that. We have a couple more questions coming in and a few more minutes to go through this before we wrap up for the day. So I want to turn, I think Professor Lothian's probably the best on this one given her nursing background, but anyone feel free to jump in after Judy addresses this. So one of the questioners notes the understandable guidelines, the pledge, all that's being involved, the monitoring apps and whatnot, but raises, I think, what's an epistemological, maybe a clinical epistemological question is, what do we do if somebody has a mild common cold, if there's a little bit of a cough? How do we distinguish those sorts of symptoms which might allow someone in another time into class or into meetings, whereas now that may not? So I guess it's a question about understanding symptoms and also maybe the broader implications of our heightened sense of awareness around COVID?
Oh, well, I'm kind of at a loss. Let me
Just
let
a
me
small
think.
question, Judy.
Just a small question. Well, I think the camp is clear. We worked hard to get the questions down, and also having traveled internationally, coming into JFK, the forms that you fill out, and also over in Ireland, and the language is very often, is this a new symptom? As opposed to, some people have a chronic cough, or they get their nose runs when they eat hot soup or something. But is this different? And is it more than transitory, that it's here for more than, gee, this morning I coughed 3 times when I woke up and then I felt fine. So is it a new symptom, and sort of helping people to, this is the education thing, helping people to be more aware than they typically might be about what's going on with their bodies, but to be able to put what's happening in the larger context. And again, this is education of what COVID can and does not present as. Does that make sense? I do think it's an education thing, and it's also this, not only is the community have a higher level of awareness and concern, I think, but we have to help individuals, whether it's students, employees, faculty, to pay more attention to what's going on themselves, within themselves. Does that make sense?
Yes, excellent. And sort of helpfully, again, sort of pulls us back to this metaphor of the mask, paying attention to what's going on internally, given what that might cause externally. So,
right.
Thank you very much. I'm actually going to turn to one final question and just sort of open this up to anyone. And this is a huge question and forward-looking, an excellent question. How do any of the panelists? How do you think that what's going on with COVID-19 will change the future of how we understand communities and how we understand the health of communities? So anyone, feel free to pick that up in any way. And then this will be our last question. Anyone else who submitted a question, thank you, and please feel free to do so. We have a record of all these, and we will try to put something together to answer all of the follow-up questions. So right now, any of the panelists jump in. How's this going to change how we conceive of community?
Hopefully, in a positive way. I think telemedicine, I'm already recognizing, will become more prevalent. I feel like there was always a lot of pushback, but now, like, we took a course in telemedicine and the procedures of, how to communicate via your little screen. And I think that will hopefully reach more people. I think COVID-19 has exposed healthcare inequalities and how minorities do much worse, and all of that has hopefully been exposed, and I hope that momentum continues. And with telemedicine, maybe we can reach more people. I know with our Human Dimension program, we did like Zoom training sessions with the community to teach about all these things we're talking about, mask wearing and hand washing, that normally we might not have done those kind of educational opportunities with those groups, but because of Zoom and all these other platforms, our knowledge is able to be more shared. So I hope, and I see telemedicine only growing from here.
Excellent. Thank you, Erica. And Dr. Ricchetti, I'm sure will be happy that you've highlighted the wonderful Human Dimensions program. So thank you. Jenny, in light of what you said about identity, any thoughts on how communities might change? Or conception of community?
Sure, I definitely think there is going to be this culture shift that Shauna did mention, because in light of COVID, it has created this new crisis, and with new crisis, you don't really have predictive bioethics. You have, let's create bioethical issues, answers to them while they're happening. And I think this issue has already been addressed in Asian cultures, and that America, or just all other countries, are starting to wake up to this fact that, we need to come together and just create this, like I said, this social contract and bind together, like what Seton Hall's model has already shown. Even if you have different beliefs on the idea, you're going to respect others' others' health concerns and things like that. So sorry. I don't think we have come to that consensus yet, but I definitely see that shift towards community. We are going to hopefully become better with that. And in that sense, maybe in the future when COVID hopefully is eradicated somehow with our wonderful scientists today, hopefully when someone has a cold or something, they'll recognize, oh, I should wear a mask to protect other people. So it just becomes, it's not just a COVID issue, it's a everything that is like in sickness and infection issue.
Excellent. Thank you, Jenny. Shauna, any thoughts? And we're going to sort of wrap up very quickly, but because we're running out of time and I have a few announcements for folks right before we conclude. But any thoughts on the conception of community, especially in light of campuses, universities, and university communities?
Absolutely. Now go fast. My son says I talk like a rapper sometimes. So one of the things that COVID has shared with all of us as a people is that we now have the time. So many of us are not commuting every day, and many of us are, able to participate remotely or virtually. And so now we have the time. We have the time to reflect. We have the time to think. And I think that's an opportunity for us to really address some systemic issues. I will say that COVID has shed light on virtual engagement and allowed us to participate more widely. So, I might not have been able to participate in this panel if I was in meetings in person frequently. We can do virtual engagement much differently. It has noted, and I think Erica was talking about this, accessibility, whether it be telemedicine or the use of technology. It shed a light on where we have some gaps there, not just particularly as a university, but as a global society. But I will say that one of the things I've been most proud of, and I've addressed it in a number of different communications I've sent out to students, is also our adaptability. It wasn't just our faculty who had to shift to remote and online learning. Our students had to get used to learning that way too. So I've just been really impressed, particularly with the Seton Hall community and how they've been adaptable. And this is to one of the things Judith said. Some of the things that we're doing are back to foundations. Washing your hands. We should always be washing our hands. We should have always been washing our hands. And so it's really going back to foundational things that I think we may have let as a society slip, and going back to some of those fundamental pieces.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Shauna. And I just want to thank all of our panelists. We have a couple announcements for folks calling in, but we're going to be wrapping up our session now. So thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it, everybody. Please tune in next week. We have another event, the next episode of our COVID ethics series on Tuesday with another set of excellent panelists where we will discuss education, sort of K through 12 and children returning safely to school, which I think will be thought-provoking and interesting. And also just a reminder to anyone, please feel free, if you have continued questions, we'll follow up on these, but send any questions to ethics@shu.edu. For those who are interested in being on our regular list, hop on that LibWizards site and you can sign up for this. For anybody at Seton Hall, this is one of the first things I followed when it was created. IHS events, please text that to the number. There are excellent events put out by Kelly Freeman and many others. So that's a good way to be involved. And finally, do follow IHS Bioethics on Instagram and Twitter, also our IHS library and at Hall students. So a special thanks to Emma for running all the back end stuff in this session, for my continual collaborative partner, Kelly Freeman, for setting up all sorts of things, Allison Piazza for her wonderful assistance, and thank you so much to all of our panelists. If you've called in today, join us again next Tuesday, and we will see you then. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, I'm